Welcome to the Jump Off Point. I'm Sly.
And I'm Miyagi-Do, Spook, Fang, Cobra, Spook, Kai.
We're going to talk about Season 3 of Cobra Kai. Spook, initial impressions.
I don't do impressions.
Initial thoughts.
Overall, look, it's comfort food. I didn't mind the season. I had a couple of little grievances with it, which I'm sure we'll discuss as we went on the way. But probably, I feel obligated to say I liked it.
Okay, I'm a little bit different. I didn't think it was horrible, but I thought it was mostly
Horrible?
just okay. There was moments of brilliance. But, okay, so just talk about like the plotting to begin with, because the one thing that annoyed me from the beginning were the coincidences.
Yeah, you mentioned that.
So, Daniel and Johnny are looking for that van, pull into a service station, and who happens to pull in? But the van.
With the Russo dealer plates on it still.
Little girl, Daniel saves in Karate Kid 2. She just happens to be the executive of the car company.
Look, I remember sitting there thinking that it's either is it Yumiko? Did I get that right? Kamiko, sorry, I always get it wrong. Or Chosen were going to have some affiliation back to the car company. But then just to have someone come to tea and it just happened to be that person that was saved, I did laugh. Not like, I've seen far worse things than that, JJ. But it was funny. I mean, and look, and I didn't see much point of that whole trip back to Japan other than to reinvest time back into those characters and read some Miyagi letters.
Well, apparently that's the only car company in Japan that LaRusso...
and that was... I mean, I did mention this during the thing, because I'm pretty certain that in the first two seasons, LaRusso Motors sold pretty much exclusively Mercs and BMWs, all these luxury type cars, and all of a sudden their business model hinged on Japanese cars. And I remember sitting there in one of the scenes and they're looking down on the dealership and there's like a Toyota sitting there thinking, you had nothing but flash cars and now there's a Toyota there.
Oh, that's a separate dealership that had the sort of
trade-in typey thing, which is fair for second-hand stuff. But I think that they were all predominantly luxury. Maybe I got it a bit wrong.
Just jump ahead a little bit. I mean, the thing I found funny is the problem LaRusso car dealership had was getting customers in. So retaining that contract with that Japanese car manufacturer doesn't actually solve the bigger problem they had of public relations disaster, which was stopping people actually coming in to buy the cars. Other one which I found funny was, I mean, there was a lot of them, but I just jotted down a few. When Daniel and Kamiko had that evening together, and Kamiko took out all the letters from Mr. Miyagi, and Daniel just reaches in and happens to take the one letter Miyagi wrote the week of his death, which addresses all his insecurities. Robbie emerges from juvie. He just goes, I'll just drop by Miyagi-Do, right as Miguel and Sam are having a bit of a physical lovey-dovey.
Yeah.
It happened last season, but hey, let's do it again. Johnny takes Miguel to lunch, and who happens to work at that restaurant? It's Tori. And this happened frequently. These are all the ones I jotted down. It was like, we need to get the characters from A to B, and I don't know how to work it out. Let's just make them show up. Looking at the antagonists, so in the first two seasons, it was pretty clear. You had Johnny was still being an antagonist, even though they were layering his character, and you had Miguel being a little bit of a dick. And in the second season, they had Tori adding to that, but then Kreese came in. In this season, Kreese plays the principal antagonist. What do you think of his backstory?
I reckon this is one element of the season I really enjoyed. I really look forward to all those flashbacks to see where they were taking it.
Yeah, I agree. I actually really enjoyed that. I thought it was a really cool switch they pulled, where the guy pulls into the restaurant with his girlfriend. And he's a big guy, and you think, oh, that's Kreese.
Yeah.
And then Kreese turns out a bit later.
Yeah.
And that progression of his story as he joined the army and he's dick of a commanding officer and all that, I thought that was really cool. And it tied into Terry Silver at the end. That was great. The one thing that sort of annoys me is Kreese in present day, you are still being motivated by a fucking All-Valley Karate Championship from 30 years ago to recruit all these killer karate people so you can, I don't know, what's he doing? He's formulating the fucking Foot Clan to take over the valley. It's like, how deranged is this guy he's still carrying his grudge?
He's consistently been deranged.
Oh, but it's sort of escalating. You think, man, just go get a massage or something. But the bigger problem I actually found here is while they were moving Robbie into the position of being the younger antagonist, there was no one actually filling that role. And they sort of went back to Kyler, who, look, he's already lost to Miguel, so you're bringing him back. Doesn't really do anything. You're playing with Hawk actually wavering depending on, what he's doubting his allegiances and all that sort of shit. And then you have Tori in there, and this actually really annoyed me. Is Tori, again, another psycho, and she's got this similar grudge against Sam. Sam beat her up last season. And then Sam's now suffering post-traumatic stress disorder. Wouldn't it make a lot more sense if Tori beat the crap out of her at the end of the season 2, which would have elevated Tori into that principal antagonist role as the younger antagonist, and then you would have had Sam logically go into this post-traumatic stress disorder of, I've got to work out how I'm going to deal with my fear and face Tori again. Because it just didn't make sense to me. Every time they bumped into one another, Sam was terrified. It's like, you kicked her ass several times.
She slashed her arm. That could be... It's obviously breaking. But, I mean, it was an opportunity for Daniel to do all the Miyagi boost talks.
And I was fine with that, but I'm just saying they actually should have...
And do the wax on, wax off with a fishing rod once.
But look, I'm fine with that, but I just think it would have been more logical if then Sam lost at season 2, and then it's like, I don't know, J.J. Abrams or someone plotted this. It's like, let's have our chief bad guy lose the first battle, because that'll make it even better in the rematch.
I sort of thought, when at the start, when she goes back to school and she's having the flashback moment around where Miguel hit the staircase. I thought maybe this is guilt. That it's like Spider-Man losing his powers through guilt or something like that. That was going to be the block for her, that she couldn't fight or do all the Miyagi stuff because she felt associated guilt towards what happened to Miguel. But that sort of never really got explored beyond the fact that she was just, as you said, terrified of Tori.
And again, I don't mind that arc of it. She needs to rediscover or overcome her fear, but it just would have made a lot more sense than if Tori won last year, and then Tori could have been the badass. And Payton List, who plays Tori, she does a really good job of it. You could actually believe, she is the lead badass. And instead, they built it for a rematch, and it's like, well, I don't see this going any other way than it's already gone. So it's like a redundant journey.
It's like Kylo and Rey.
Yeah, well, as I said, it's like JJ plotted this. How's the rematch going to go? And the other thing, too, is you look at someone like Hawk, they pushed him a little bit as the badass, and it's like, again, this is how you build the characters, how they've built them. Okay, Hawk, let's look at it. Dimitri beat him up, Robbie beat him up, and Miguel beat him up. So it's like, well, hey, why are you pushing this guy as possibly as your lead villain? Again, it doesn't fit.
No.
So I actually thought they really messed up the way they structured all that. What do you think of Robbie's turn?
The whole dynamic between Kreese, Johnny, and Robbie reminds me a little bit of Star Wars with Emperor Vader and Luke, and I think it gets to the point where Kreese sort of realised that when he wasn't going to be able to hang on to Johnny or convert him one more time, that he was going to set his sights on Robbie. So I think the progression there for him to do that turn was probably fairly expected.
Yeah, I always thought like at some point they were going to switch. So you had Miguel originally in Cobra Kai, and I always thought there was going to be a switch and Robbie would turn to the dark side.
He always seemed too nice to be in Cobra Kai.
Yeah, but you needed the motivation for that. And the problem I had with that is you look at the arc that Robbie has. So he goes in the juvie, and Daniel repeatedly tries to visit him. Johnny even tries a couple of times, and Sam repeatedly emails him. And then he comes out and it's like, well, you've all betrayed me. It's like they all were making efforts to you. It's like, and the thing with Daniel turning him in, I thought they could have strung that along for a while, that maybe Robbie was in hiding and Daniel was trying to talk him into turning himself in. And, you could have pushed that for a few episodes to get you to feel that, Daniel genuinely does betray him at some point. They didn't do that, so actually I was pretty disappointed in the way they turned that around. I always thought this was going to happen, but it was just such a flippant flip almost. Miguel?
Again, look, that's another expected thing. The thing I thought actually that I enjoyed throughout this season was that whole recovery path for Miguel, because it was treated with a fair bit of humour. I think it was some of the season's funniest gags sort of came out of that. You know, that blind
falling over when he's trying to get his phone.
ridiculous,
right after surgery.
Ridiculous look that outlook that Johnny had about how you just get over this just by manning up type thing, which is, but some of the stuff worked. I think, that even though it sort of felt a little bit accelerated and whatnot, and he got back onto his feet and was throwing kicks again pretty quick. I think you mentioned that there was a passage of time there.
Yeah, so I mean, there is meant to be obviously a time lapse because it parallels Dimitri's recovery from the broken arm, and that's going to be about 12 weeks. But the pacing is so weird that like they're injured and pretty incapacitated one scene, and then a couple of scenes later, I mean, Dimitri had the plaster on, I think, for a couple of scenes where they did the jokes with Yasmin signing it and all that sort of stuff. But then it was just gone.
Yeah. No, but I didn't mind it. And I think,
The one thing I like with Miguel was the scenes with Daniel, when they were sitting in the car and they were comparing what Johnny had told Miguel versus what Daniel told Miguel about, the past. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Yep.
How about Hawk? Because I have a real problem with this character.
I mean, that actually probably, that quickness of his turn really surprised me. And it's not, again, it didn't feel like my expectations being subverted or anything like that. It was just out of whack.
I found this truly amazing.
You've been an absolute prick this whole season.
No, and it escalated this season. So he broke Dimitri's arm. He robbed the
snake,
Nathaniel, the car wash money, and
the snake.
Yep. Well, that was Robbie.
It was Hawk's idea.
Yeah. He delivered He delivered the beating to that Kyla's friend. Sorry, I can't remember his name. And it's like, he's at his most vicious. And then after they've attacked LaRusso's house and they've gone in and they're right in the fight, right in the heat of the fight, it's like, I think I'll change sides now. It's like, what? Why would that happen?
Were you talking about some of these fights as well?
Oh, we'll get into it
Good.
A bit later. So I actually just didn't understand why he got flipped over. Like, I thought,
it didn't make any sense. Like, at no point did he ever give any indication that he was questioning his loyalty to Cobra Kai. It seemed pretty ironclad.
Yeah.
Like, there was no sort of moments of doubt or self-hesitancy or anything like that. It was just like, I think I'll just switch now.
And that probably could have worked if maybe Kreese brought in a new star student and then, Hawk's feeling like, I'm being usurped. And Kreese did bring in people, but they were immediately down the pecking order, I don't know the woman's name, but Tori beat up one of them, and then Hawk himself beat up Kyla's friend, and then Kyla was obviously intimidated by that. It was like, all right, well, why are you jumping? And if it's Robbie, it's like, I don't think that was strong enough motivation at that point, unless Kreese showed genuine favouritism to Robbie, which he didn't at that point. He was just sort of saying, I think he's going to be good for us. Tori we've discussed enough, but I actually felt Tori was symptomatic of the season, that she had a problem at the start with her ill mother and rent and shit. It was solved and that was it. That was the end of the arc. And a lot of it, Miguel had the rehabilitation, healed, end of the arc. And they were just very simplified things. I actually found that, disengaging. The two big ones, Daniel's arc.
Mm-hmm.
What did you feel about... half the season he's worried about his car dealership, and then the other half he's training Miyagi-Do to fight the Foot Clan. It never actually felt like he was reaching into any great wisdom to realise what to do. It was just like, okay, I'm going to go to Japan. Typically, he learns a super move, which is what happens in every one of these seasons. I wish I'd stop it. It's like when Chosen teaches him, this is how you incapacitate a limb. And you just sitting there going, I wonder if that might come in use at some point. So I wish I'd stopped the super move. And then he just comes back and does what he always wanted to do, which was to train Miyagi-Do against the Foot Clan.
Yeah.
And then you have Johnny, and this actually really annoyed me because I thought his character was done a massive disservice. At the end of season 2, he's sitting on the beach, he's drunk, he's really distraught. He gets up, he throws his drink at his car, which has the Cobra Kai symbol, and you think, okay, that's him spurning everything he's known. And then the first few episodes of this season, he's just drunk. And then he's just still the same guy. And then he opens a mirror dojo which is exactly the sort of stuff he was spurning at the end of season 2. And it's like, what do you do? And the thing is, he regressed. If you go back to season 2, when they were out, when they unwittingly had a double date with Daniel and his wife, Johnny was the more civil one. Johnny was the mature one. He was the one who sort of reached out and met Daniel, past halfway. When Daniel was right about Sam and went to Johnny's, Johnny was the one being reasonable. Johnny's just gone totally, he's gone full dick in this one. It's like he's starting fights with Daniel. He's several times try to start fights with Daniel. He goes into that chop shop and beats up everyone. And it's like, well, this isn't character progression. You're just actually keeping this character where he was, while you're moving other characters in the position, which I think was a big theme of this season. While characters were being pushed to where they needed to be, a lot of characters were just staying in holding positions.
Yeah, this is the first season under Netflix, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I get the impression that originally this was probably at best going to be a 3-season show. And I think when Netflix has come along, it's almost like, well, we're not going to do one season and call it quits. We want to make this go for another 2 or 3 years. And you're looking at the story content going, well, a lot of this stuff is almost borderline resolved.
Yeah.
This season felt like just padding a lot of the time. It was meandering just to pad things out to get to now this, like, when they started talking about the next... Happy Valley tournament or whatever it's called?
All Valley
tournament, that was going to take place this season, and then it just kept getting further and further away, and we had this little minor distraction about, again, the councillors banning it and all that sort of stuff, and then the amazing change of heart, which you didn't see coming. Of it just felt like you're just padding out this season. And I'm really hopeful, and I'm very confident that based on what I've seen with the first 2 seasons, that they're going to pick up and hit their.
I think they've got the characters in place where they won them now. But the way the season ended felt like where it should have actually started, with Johnny and Daniel allying, and Kreese recruiting Robbie, and all that sort of stuff.
That could have been done by episode 2.
It felt like a lot of it was padded. And I'm just going to jump ahead a little bit, because the one thing that also annoys me is, if you go back to the original movie, they're bullying him and that shit and all that sort of stuff. Okay, now you fast forward to this series, and in the first season they were bullying Miguel. Again, that's shit, but that's part of actually high school. So I'm not saying it's the right thing to do, but that happens. But then you get to season 3, and Cobra Kai is actually now committing felonies.
Yeah.
They steal the car wash money and they beat up Nathaniel, who was the kid who had the money. Like, they beat him up seriously. So that's assault and battery and theft.
Yep.
They rob Chris, who's the Cobra Kai defector, who with Daniel, and now he's works at the arcade. And they jump the counter, they steal some stuffed toys and all that. So again, that's theft. It's not like, you could have got me fired. It's like, that's fucking illegal. Go call the cops. They break Dimitri's arm, which is assault and battery.
Yep.
They throw Bert through a window at Daniel's house and then trash the house and beat the people up. So there's assault and battery, there's breaking and entering there, trespassing. They steal the snake, and that's going to be like an even bigger crime because it's probably an endangered species and in the zoo and all that sort of shit. These are actual crimes.
Yeah.
They're not just sort of like, oh, we can rationalise it. Well, it's bullying, it's kids beating up on kids and all that sort of... These are actually going into massive crimes. And this is one thing that annoyed me with Tori last season, is when she slashed Sam open with the studded bracelet. It's like, okay, you're sort of going beyond bullying into actual psychosis here, or what you're trying to do. And you're doing all these major fucked up things, and then Kreese is like, yeah, we'll settle this at the All Valley. We'll settle this at the tournament.
And the cops are off the side going, oh, thank Christ, that tournament's coming. Because, we were powerless to do anything.
So I actually found that really bizarre, because I'm just watching and thinking, okay, Daniel, Amanda, Johnny, any of you, just go to the cops and report him. You cannot get out of this. You got the fucking snake in your dojo. It's evidence.
How did that get there?
You got a witness. They beat up Nathaniel. He's a witness. He could just turn around and go, yes, they beat me up and stole the car wash money. So I just found this bizarre that you're going from bullying into total felonies, and they're just sort of going along, oh, this fucking rivalry, we're going to up the ante at some point. So actually really, that frustrated me quite a bit. In terms of like the season, so what we got, about 10 episodes, whatever it is, that about 14 fights. Because it just seemed like there was another major melee every second episode.
Yep.
And they weren't little things. They were like, again, you're talking about gang violence here. This is what it becomes reduced to. And all the characters just walk around like, we got to get them. We got to get them next time. It's like, what is this, West Side Story?
It was over the top. And again, it comes back to the padding stuff as well. It was just like, we need to sort of throw them at each other and do something. But it was just, look, I mean, it's a show, blah, blah, blah. But it was just, the karate stuff felt really unrealistic in this.
Yeah.
That it was just, again, it was, like you said, it's just gang violence at the end of the day.
Oh, and the thing is...
and you lose that sense of, you've been preached around, Miyagi-Do's for defense only and all that sort of thing, and they touched on that a couple of times, and Cobra Kai attack and all that sort of stuff. But it was just like the fundamental thing of martial arts was always that, look, you only just use it when you need to use it.
Yep.
But they're just exploiting it like this superpower. It was just a little bit too over the top. I'm more interested in the characters and the fight scenes. The fight scenes, I can wait till the end of the season to the Happy Valley tournament to get the karate fix, and it should never have been that much about the fighting type stuff.
Yeah, I totally agree. And again, you also sort of pitting people against each other who've already fought each other. So if you look at something like boxing, a lot of times the boxing matches, they don't have rematch after rematch after rematch because it would just be boring and people aren't going to buy it. And you're pitting like Sam against Tori again and Miguel against Dimitri. And I mean, at least not Miguel against Dimitri, I mean, Hawk versus Dimitri. And at least in that case, they reversed the results. So it was different. But you just constantly sort of going, well, let's do this again. And the thing that also frustrated me is Kreese was weeding out what he considered the weaklings in Cobra Kai. Okay, that's fine. But then the weaklings go to Miyagi-Do, and it's like, hang on. This is not their choice. They're just actually going to you because they have no option because they were thrown out. It's not like Chris and the other guys who deserted Cobra Kai last season. They actually made a conscious choice. I don't want to be part of this shit. I want to be part of something better. So they go to Miyagi-Do. I forgot his name, but Chris's former friend, he the one Kyler beat up. He didn't want to leave Cobra Kai. He got thrown out. And it's like, I'll go to Miyagi-Do. And it's like, well, hang on. Why are you taking him on? He doesn't actually adopt your philosophies. It's just that they've rejected him. So that was, I thought, really annoying. Ali, her coming back for her one episode.
Did she need to remind you how much of a terrible actress she is?
Oh, I wouldn't say that. I actually thought they really... Okay, so I actually find one thing... Cobra Kai's done magnificently for the most part is they've honoured canon. And when you go back to their callbacks from the movies, and they did this in this season, the stuff with Kamiko and Chosen was fantastic.
Yeah,
I thought some of that Chosen stuff was really fantastic, funny too.
Yep.
Like when Daniel wanted to get a drink and Chosen screaming, "No, I'll get it!" I thought it was really, really cool. But Ali, I thought, was the first misfire. It was a really big misfire. So... Okay, I know you've given more layers to Johnny, but that doesn't change the fact he was still a pretty abusive boyfriend. And Ali's back like, how good were we, back then? And they almost kiss after.
Oh, it's also just before you keep going. It's the convenience of her backstory just changing. Well, now I'm separated,
yeah.
And you had Johnny re-establishing, like everyone re-established their relationships in this season with Carmen, and suddenly it's like, well, she's really good, and that they sleep together, and then suddenly Ali turns up and I'm free again.
Yeah.
And you're thinking, that's just too convenient. It would have been better if they just caught up, whereas more or less where they ended up going, but to sort of rekindle.
My bigger problem there was the Ali who came back. I mean, she was meant to be the bright and bubbly Ali, but again, she was retconning, or they retconned quite a bit. And that scene at the function where she was talking to Daniel about why they split up in the Karate Kid too, and they actually retconned that quite a bit. It was like he got really jealous because he saw her with another guy. Whereas in the Karate Kid too, I mean, they say quite openly she left him for a football player. And it's like, well, okay, I guess you can add some different layering to that. But it was like they changed it all around so she could deliver the speech of, well, there's three versions of the truth, yours, his, and what the truth is. And actually she came across as like an annoying commentator on their behaviour, which wasn't required.
Yeah, I found that whole thing flat.
And at the end, like, it was a nice little touch where Johnny says something like, "See you later, LaRusso," and then he goes, "Daniel," and it's like, okay, there's some middle ground there. And I thought, okay, well, that's nice, but that was pretty much done at the dinner last season. And again, there was a lot of those reiterations of those beats that we just, hey, we've seen you do this a little bit better. Final fight between, what is it, between Robbie and Johnny, and then Johnny and Kreese, and then Daniel and Kreese, and I don't know. Look, no offense to Martin Kova, I think it's fantastic, but he's obviously struggling at his age with some of the karate.
There was clearly a body double in there.
Yeah, and I think at times they needed to. I mean, they're obviously going to bring Terry Silver in next year, and he's actually younger than Ralph Macchio, even though he mentored, or his character mentored Daniel in the third movie. But I actually thought this season I'd bring in someone, whether it was going to be that Terry Silver or Mike Barnes from the third movie, to do the heavy lifting of...
Where Kreese couldn't do
it. Yeah, and there was like that scene where the landlord came with the two heavies, and then the next scene you see the landlord's been roughed up. And I'm thinking, look, I'm sorry, but and it's nothing against Martin Cove. It's just the reality is at a certain age, you're not pulling off the action beats as realistically as when you were even 10 years younger. I mean, you go to something like Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, and you can see that Harrison Ford's not exactly the Harrison Ford from the 1980s. I don't move the same way I did 5 years ago.
I don't move at all.
Yeah, well, there you go. So I actually thought those fight scenes, they were shot well, but like I really struggled to sort of believe that
he'd be a force to be reckoned with
against two of them
who were skilled fighters and much younger.
And they sort of like, he did cheat a bit, but I mean, again, this sort of goes to I don't know, the juxtaposition of what the show does. It's like, okay, he's fighting Johnny. Johnny goes to check on Robbie, who's unconscious, and then Kreese grabs the weapon from the wall.
Yeah, the sai.
Yeah, and then he smashes Johnny on the back, and he's just like, "Oh, I'm gonna kill you now. It's not like I'm just gonna beat you. I'm gonna fucking kill you for two." And 2 scenes later, I'll settle this at the tournament.
I actually thought that he was gonna, someone was gonna end up impaled on that.
I thought it was too. And I thought
everything was either going to be Robbie accidentally impaled, but that would have been too much of a throwback to the coincidence of the way that last season finished. Yeah. Or I thought Johnny might have been the obvious one, that when Chris sped him, that he could have just put it into his leg or something and fucked him up around a little bit, but it didn't go the way I thought it was going to go in that.
What I actually thought was going to happen, and what I hoped was going to happen, was I thought Chris was going to get his head punched in. And then Terry Silver or Mike Barnes, or Terry Silver and Mike Barnes, were going to emerge and just smash the shit out of Daniel and Johnny, and then just go, okay, that's it. It's war now. And Daniel and Johnny would sort of back away with like, oh, fuck, we're fucked. And that's why they joined forces. That would be the motivation to like, we've just had our asses handed to us by a superior force. Now we need to unite. We can't be at odds anymore. I actually thought that would have been a lot better finish, a lot stronger going into next season, knowing that, okay, because they did, like, Kreese rang up Terry Silver. It's like, okay, well, who cares? You should have put him in a position of strength. And that's something I thought the first season did really well, is that climax that Miguel wins and Cobra Kai's back on top. And you're like, okay, the bad guys, or, I know, again, they've layered the characters, but Cobra Kai represents the bad guys. And it's like, oh, well, they're on top. That means that the goodies have a lot more work. And that's the way that season finishes, with Daniel teaching Robbie and Sam. It's like, all right, we've got a lot of work to do. And I thought that's where this season needed to finish, rather than where it did. Because it really, like, at the end of the season, at the end of the season 3, I really thought we're really just where the season 3 should have began. Should have been with these new allegiances and a shift in the landscape.
Yep.
Any final thoughts about?
I clearly think that no Stingray, no Cobra Kai.
Well, what do you think about Stingray and Aisha?
Aisha was because that was only loosely touched upon, wasn't it? There was like a couple of the girls at the school mentioned that how Sam gonna cope with even Alicia's parents took her away or something like
Yeah.
that. And that was it. That was the last mention of a, not even like an email or a phone call or anything.
I read up about her, and they just said that the creators, the writers, just said, well, we don't really have anything for her to do this season, but that doesn't mean she's gone forever, so we can still bring it back. And like, I applaud her for that. There's no point keeping characters around who you don't have stuff to do, then you just got to... And like, there's a few characters like that. I mean, I thought Dimitri was largely redundant this season too. And he also represented what they did. Like, they picked up story threads like with him and Yasmin, like they're making out, and that was it. It was like one scene they're making out, it was like, that was it. And there was a lot of little threads like that were thrown up, and it was like, that was it. Stingray?
I mean, he was purely there for comic relief at any rate, so there's no great loss there. But
was he? I thought he was the major misfire of season 2. It's like you're creating a show that has this 80s feel to it, which is, drama, comedy, a little bit outlandish, but he took it into farce, and I thought it really went one step too far, and they should have reined that in last season. They didn't. Apparently, like, the actor's just too busy. He's getting a lot of stuff now, but I was actually glad that they'd gotten rid of him, because I thought he undermined the villainy of Cobra Kai. And if you look at Cobra Kai, I thought they actually built him up this season where they had a few new recruits who were a lot bigger. They weren't they traded on that geek factor in the first season.
Yeah.
But it's like this season, like, we need now to be seen as a threat. Final thoughts?
Look, as I said earlier, I've got a lot of hope about where it goes from here. I think they'll probably look back at this season and think that I reckon that, again, it was underlying reasons why it sort of became a pad fest. But I think they'll look at it, and the first 2 seasons were too good for them to not look at that and say, I think we got a little bit wrong. It's a little bit like, I think, almost like the 3rd season of Battlestar Galactica, where it had that season-long arc that just didn't work properly inside of the structure of the show, and they went back and they post that season looked at their mistakes and corrected them and moved and shuffled the show around and got it back on track again. I reckon they'll do this, no hesitancy of doubt, in season 4. How they're going to pad that whole tournament, because it'll surely finish on the tournament fight.
Well, you can't go anywhere after that.
But yeah, you got 9 episodes of filling that. It'll be curious to see what they bring in. I mean, there's no one else from the films or anything off to the side that's of
unless
merit
they
to bring in.
Michael Ironside in from the next Karate Kid, or Jackie Chan from the reboot.
It'd be good to see what limbs he loses if they bring Michael Ironside in. There'll be some sort of accident.
And I mean, Terry Silver and Mike Barnes were it for Karate Kid 3, so that's the villains. I suppose you could just keep bringing people in, but the genuine interest in this has been really the rivalry between Johnny and Daniel. So,
and it's not a bad thing to bring in new characters as well, because like Tori was new, and I think she
Tori
worked really well.
But I think they undersold her last season. That was the biggest problem with her.
So there's obviously scope there to bring somebody else into that caliber and see where it goes from there.
Yep. I actually think, okay, now they have the pieces in place, that season 4 will be a lot better. I don't know how much COVID affected them, because I did read when COVID was just breaking out, but their production was affected. But then later on I read, no, they'd finished it all and they were in post-production. But watching it sometimes I was thinking, surely this wasn't part of the plan. Were they forced to do a few things where they used extra scenes, padding or whatever, just to finish the season off, because there was no way they could go back in the shooting? But I mean, now they have everyone in place. I'm hoping that, I believe that, hey, it will be a lot better next season.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's a little bit of critique inside of this review, but overall though, still, when you look at the way that Mandalorian ended this season, that you need shows like this that actually just respect the past, respect the characters that live inside of it, and they're doing their utmost best to give them a journey still moving forward and filling in the past. I think overall it's an admirable job that they're doing with this show, and I think the fact that the universal love for Cobra Kai, a few of my friends have gotten onto it and played catch up.
We got onto it first.
Played catch up, and they all love it, and their kids are loving it. And I think it's one of those shows that does have broad reaching and wide appeal, which is amazing. I mean, you probably look back at as the films as novelty value.
Yep.
You probably watch them.
Our first movie is a classic.
Once or twice a year, and it's again, it's comfort food. They're not outstandingly brilliant films, but they're really enjoyable films. And this show it's sort of kicking on from that, and kudos to everyone involved. Keep it up.
Yep, I've got a synopsis here for the first episode of next season.
You made this up?
No, this is true. So
Okay.
we got my document open. Here it is. Miguel goes to search for Daniel, only to find he's marooned himself on a desert isle and has gone there to die.
Is he sucking milk out of a space cow?
Yes, he is. Anyway, that's it from us.
All right.
All right,
Thanks for
later.
listening.